What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie. Cold because once again it's winter in Texas. And today I'm going to rank the solos on Frank Zappa's Make a Jazz Noise Here album. This is part 5 in my Ranking Frank's Solos series. I originally intended to only, or at least start with, the ones that were released after Frank passed away, knowing in my heart that I was eventually just going to do all of them because why not? But the most recent one I did, number 4, was Zappa 88, the last US show. And I gave off a very bad impression of, my impression of the 88 tour was not good based on that release. But I know there were really good solos out there from the 88 tour, and I didn't want to wait until I do all these other shows. I felt like I wanted to follow up that with a more positive opinion of the 88 tour. So I'm doing this album. It is the third release from the 88 tour, the third of fourth at this point, though the fourth one didn't come out until a couple years ago. But what is different about this than that last US show is Frank had at his disposal every single guitar solo he recorded on this tour, pretty much for any given song. As we know, Frank sometimes, like even in this one, you have a song called Star Wars Won't Work, which looks like it's part of a King Kong. It's not part of a King Kong. So you know that if Frank recorded it, he could take if he had 14 versions of Stinkfoot, he could take 4 lines from one show, 4 lines from another show, one solo from another show, the actual main solo from another show. He mixes and matches. So he had at his disposal every solo recorded. So of course this is going to be a better release than a single snapshot of a show. Not of course. There were some fantastic shows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about all 10 solos that were played on this show, on this release. And then at the end of the discussion, I will put that list on the screen so you can look at it visually for you visual learners. Then I'm going to combine the two lists, the after he died, the before he died, though this is the first of those releases. And I will show where this ranks among all the releases thus far, though this is only 5. But to make it easier as to which came when, early releases, the Make a Jazz Noise stuff that Frank actually had his hands on, those will be in red. The ones released after Frank passed away will be in black. The red and the black. Canadian Mountie babies, police force at work. So here we go. Let's get started. Number 10, Stevie Spanking. It's just not much to this at all. It's not your epic, just numbing 5, 6, 7 minute solo from the 82 tour where him and maybe in Vi stepping up and they're going at it and it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's like a bludgeon on the head with just aggression and metal guitar and all that stuff. Nah, this is just kind of a shorter effort that almost seems to be lost in the dun-dun-dun-dun-dun vamp that dominates the whole thing. It really does absolutely nothing for me. I think the highlight of this tour, of this solo, are the horns in the early part, but then they drop out, and it just doesn't do anything for me. The song doesn't do much for me either, especially in the 88 tour. Number 9 is Advanced Romance. It almost sounds like at this point, that vamp, I've never been a big fan of that Advanced Romance vamp. It really seems to kind of just, I don't know, limit where Frank can go in his guitar playing. And it almost seems like at this point, after playing Advanced Romance for so long, going all the way back to Bongo Fury in 75, he's just out of ideas. The vamp seems to dominate. Frank just seems to be some of these, he's riding the vamp, he's a surfer or something, and he's using the vamp to his benefit. This one, it just seems like he's like a fish swimming in a stream, and the swing, he seems kind of lost in the whole thing. The highlight of it, without a doubt, is the rhythm section, Keneally's rhythm work, the keys, all of that stuff. The backing band itself, I find myself sort of more distracted by what's going on with other members of the band, and I kind of lose Frank's guitar solo in this. So, number 9. Number 8 is Alien Orifice. It's a pretty decent solo. I really like that. Even though, again, this is sort of a vamp that limits where Frank can go, but sort of just several bars of just kind of a little bit of place to explore, and then you get this dun 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 dun, and this sort of build up. I always imagine he's like a salmon swimming upstream, and he's just like he swims, and then he reaches one of those like places he has to jump, and he's like dun 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 dun, swimming dun 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 like that. The 81 Alien Orifice solos are fantastic. This is sort of a pale comparison to those. It's decent. It just can't compare to 81. And it's just, I don't think it adds much to the song. I think really on this tour, Frank's guitar solo is there because there's always been a guitar solo there. Number 8. Number 7, we take a big step up, I think, in quality after those first 3. It's the opening Stinkfoot. I really like this. It's got that really thin, crystallized sort of tone, that really clean, pure, but at the same time a little tingly tone that he would use on this tour. And I think the thing I really like about Stinkfoot, and the Stinkfoot solo in particular, is it knows its place. It knows it's an opening solo. It knows there will be many more solos to follow. It can just come out, and Frank can lazily come into an idea and just kind of casually like warm up, but at the warm up he is intriguing and compelling in it. The Stinkfoot solos always seem to be of a singular idea from start to finish, and they just seem to like have a coherency to them, and they're just awesome ways to start a show. This is a great solo. It warms you up to the show very well. Tune this, Scott, the bass player, from the get-go is like making his presence known. So yeah, a really great start to the album, a really great start to whatever show it was played on. Stinkfoot is number 7. Number 6 is Oh No. I like the Oh No solo. If you have Transfusion, or you know the album Transfusion, Soul Polka is the an Oh No solo that was extracted from Oh No and released as a solo. That is the vibe of this Soul Polka. It has this really upbeat. I mean, you can almost imagine the vamp because it's coming after a little like Orange County Lumberchuck callback. It's just this very like dun, 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 very upbeat, very like almost like you can do the polka to it. And it's just got this really, really great groove. I don't know if like the solo itself really goes anywhere, but Frank is like in the pocket on this one. This is like, I think this is like, my analogy for this is snowboarding down like the half pipe, right? Where they're going down and it's not that like mogul skiing. There's no jumps. They're just in the pipe, right? And they're like, and it's not somebody who's going way out there and doing these crazy like flips and stuff like that. You know, it's this, you're pretty much riding it down the entire way. Only it goes for like 2.5, 3 minutes. And Frank's just riding that. But he's riding it incredibly well. Maybe he's doing some spins. Maybe he's getting a little bit of air every so often. But it's just a really solid groove with like this momentous forward energy. Yeah, really, really good. Oh No. That's number 6. Number 5 is the City of Tiny Lights solo. We get the Carlos Santana secret chord progression. We get a pretty nice kind of slow intro. Frank kind of eases his way into this before he eventually just starts like his 88 just kind of going crazy and super fast, and the tone that he uses, the notes kind of blur together in this like speedy whirlwind. But this is one of those solos, and it's the same for the previous show, the 88 show, where the longer the solo goes on, the better it gets. Because it almost is like Frank is like, oh, I've been playing for 1.5, 2 minutes now. I need to do something different. How about I just start playing some chords? Oh no, it's been another 30 seconds. I need to do something different. I need to like start playing some low notes and bending them all crazy and doing some weird stuff. And it's not like that's what I'm sure that's not what he is intentionally thinking or actually thinking, but that's what it feels like, because it just feels like every 30 seconds or so you get this new fresh idea. Doesn't last very long. Like the band doesn't abandon the vamp Carlos Santana and follow him. Frank is just knowing he can play with these little ideas, jump back into sort of the speed thing, play with some more ideas, jump back into the flow, and it just, the more it goes on, the more it feels like it might unravel, but it just never does. He like mixes it up really, really nicely. I don't think this one is as good as the one that's on the last US show. So that release did beat this release in that regard. But it is a really good solo. Number 5. Number 4 is the Black Page, the New Age version. This is a really nice opening to the solo where it's like just this, and then he just holds this note and like sustain just kind of spreads through it, and you're not really sure what's going to happen, and he kind of plays with that just like drawn out long notes for a while before he just sort of takes off into like solo territory. I've always thought of this. This is probably one of the solos I've listened to more than any other from this tour because I really like the New Age version of the Black Page, and I really like the solo, but it does feel like it's one melodic or narrative idea, but the narrative is like a Faulkner novel, so it's pretty dense, and you don't quite pick up on all the themes, or you're not even really sure you know who's talking at any point in time or what's being said, but the more you listen to it, the more those sort of it makes sense and you understand what Frank's doing and where he's going. And this is one of those solos, when I listen to it, I can sing along to like every little moment. I've heard this solo far too much in my life. Not the best solo on the album, but because it happens to be in that song. But it's just great. The bass player, Tunis, the drummer, Wackerman, out of control during this thing. Fantastic. But yeah, it just, I don't know what I wrote right there. Like the thread. I don't know what that means. Yeah, there's like a thread that runs through this thing. I really like that. So yeah, but I really like this solo. Fantastic solo. Again, this solo I think is much better than the one on the, maybe not much better, but it is quite a lot more of a, leaves an impact more than the one from the last US show. Number 3 is Cruising on Burgers. Cruising with burgers, cruising on burgers with daddy's new car, cruising with burgers, cruising on burgers, cruising for burgers. What is happening? Cruising for burgers in daddy's new car. That was weird. Great solo. Starts off with that awesome moment that they also have in like the Zinni, where it starts off with that do 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 little part, and then he just takes off and he's just gone and he just goes. And maybe the first minute and a half or so, it almost seems like we're not going anywhere. We've put the pedal to the metal and we're just going to race towards the finish. And that goes on for about a minute and a half. But then you start to realize that Wackerman and Tunis are not going to let him just do that. Then Keneally steps up, and I'm assuming it's him, the rhythm guitar player. I'm assuming it's Keneally. And Keneally's rhythm guitar just all of a sudden gets really, really weird, and it's very present, and crazy things start happening. And just like the City of Tiny Lights, the longer this solo goes on, the weirder it gets, the more Frank's like, I haven't done this in like 3 or 4 minutes. I don't think I've done this noise tonight. I haven't bent strings for like 30 seconds, so far in this show. And it just feels like you get a little bit of everything. And it just, again, feels more and more and more chaotic as the cruising for burgers lasts long into the night. And as the night goes on, you're willing to try crazier things. And that feels like what this solo is. But the entire band, the entire rhythm section, Keneally included, are so amazing on this. Just lift it to a whole other level, I think. Number 3. Number 2 and number 1, I gave the same numerical score to when I listened to these. I couldn't decide which one was better. So I re-listened to them a couple times, and then I decided that the one that is at number 2 has a much better, more exciting ending, but that the number 1 and number 1 has more of a cohesive thread that runs to it, that I think after more and more, the more you listen to it, or the more I listened to it in a very short period of time, the more I was like, okay, now what is, I was trying to get into the narrative a little more, and I felt myself more pulled in by what Frank was trying to accomplish. Number 2, Star Wars Won't Work. Too short, needs to go on for an extra 2-3 minutes. If it goes on for another 30 seconds, it probably takes the number 1 spot. It is not a King Kong solo. It was actually a post Stairway to Heaven solo at the show it was played. They played Stairway to Heaven. All of a sudden, Frank hits his loop pedal, the same loop that you can hear, I think, on Dupree's Paradise on Jazz Noise. That was what Frank would do on the 88 tour, is before the show, he would record some loops and put them in a pedal, and then throughout the show, sometimes, like during like Pound for Brown, King Kong, Dupree's, these monster songs, he would hit the pedal, and that would be the basis for his guitar solo. Sometimes it would be the basis for other things. But after the Stairway to Heaven, he hits the pedal, that vamp starts, he starts going off on the Star Wars Won't Work, which was the secret theme of the night, the secret word of the night, and then he drops just an absolutely fantastic solo that sounds like structured chaos. It seems like you have this pedal vamp, this repeated riff, you have Wackerman on drums doing one thing, you have Tunis on bass doing another thing, and you have Frank trying to navigate through the chaos that is just all around him, but he's adding to the chaos because he's one other element that doesn't seem like it's really connecting to the other three elements, but somehow it all works perfectly. It is one that towards the end of this, it just becomes like almost like just chaotic, and things get a lot more frantic. He gets to this point where he just starts playing the Star Wars Won't Work melody, and he's just like, no, 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 no. And he just like tweaks that and bends it. And it kind of reminds me of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, when he's like, the you took too much part, when he eats the adrenal gland. It seems like this solo and the one that follows it, it's like Frank just took part of the adrenal gland, and he's just like 100% just going, cannot control himself. But yeah, it's a fantastic solo. And I really like that it's, Frank did this also in 84, where when you would get to a solo in a song, it would just be like this brand new vamp you never heard that had no connection to the song, and then he would solo over it, and it took me out of the song. But in 88, he used the vamp in a different way, because he dropped it like after Stairway to Heaven. So it's just like this jam in the middle of nowhere. It was like at the end of Monster songs, so it wasn't ruining the flow of the song. And I think because of that, they all feel, I think Frank knows it felt more organic. And these solos are just fantastic, because they're like nothing else Frank has ever played. Like, it's just like, this was the night for this vamp. And this solo, this vamp, it wasn't going to happen again. Same with Fire and Chains. Another one of those vamp things. It came out of this Fire and Chains thing that they were saying, hearkening back to the Frank Zappa Meets the Mother of Prevention album. So he has the loop. Scott Tunis is friggin' amazing in this. At one point he starts, I don't know the musical term for this, I'm sorry but he starts playing like his bass line. He starts like playing a chord. I guess it's like almost like he's playing an arpeggiated chord, or he's playing like, whatever he's playing like the root note or something. But he does something on the bass where all of a sudden this solo, which is pretty much just around this loop, almost feels like it's on over like an actual chord progression. And Tunis, because of what he's doing, gives Frank's solo this lift. And then when he drops that and he goes back to like his regular bass playing, it's almost like the bottom falls out and Frank's able to just take off without any sort of like, friction slowing him down underneath. I think it's about 2.5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes into the solo. It's maybe 2/3 of the way through it. So like 2:20, 2:30 maybe. Oh, such a fantastic moment. But if you're listening to it, don't even listen to Scott. Like, just focus on the guitar, because at one point the whole mood's going to change and you're going to feel like it's it's over a different progression, and it's powerful. It's just the absolute brilliance of Scott Tunis as a bass player. But the cool thing about this is it never really picks up speed like the underlying vamp. It just has this really almost like Star Wars Won't Work, this weird like sludgy, almost give and take type vibe that Frank is just like forging his way through as quickly as he can, as aggressively as he can. But it just works, man. It's just absolutely like this torrid pace of a solo. But the contrast with the vamp, Wackerman on drums, and Scott Tunis's brilliant bass work elevates this solo to like easily for me. Not easily, because it tied numerically with Star Wars Won't Work, but ultimately I think it was Tunis that pushed this over the edge and made it number one. But yeah, it's a great solo, as is Star Wars Won't Work. But yeah, so there they are right there. That's the order I would rank them if I was going to rank them in words. And then this is where I would put the album right there. So it is quite a bit higher than the last US 88 show. Well, one album higher. But yeah, it's pretty good. Two albums higher. But yeah, it's pretty good. Not as good as that most recent Munich Mud show, which I thought was pretty fantastic. Or one album higher. And then not as good. It actually numerically score-wise, because I'm scoring the solos to try to figure this out. I'm being completely analytical and uptight about this one. And had the same numerical breakdown as the Zagreb Ljubljana album. They both had the same score overall, but I do think the Zagreb show with that Chunga's Revenge and those Zuda Lures, for me, is just a little more interesting, despite the fact that this is still really, really, really good. So anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Leave your comments below. Love getting comments. All that stuff. I'm going to go get warm. This is the cold room in the house. But thanks. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Share with your friends. And most importantly, go listen to music, people. Go listen to Fire and Chains and Star Wars Won't Work if you haven't heard it, because those are fantastic Frank solos. But that's it. Peace. Talk to you later.